WLC AM 1310, 95.1 FM, and its management. Attorney Nathaniel Lee, a lawyer with credibility, success, and experience. Representing people in hundreds of jury trials, Nathaniel Lee is who you want by your side in the courtroom. You've seen the rest, now hire the best. Contact Lee, Cosell, and Feigley today. And now, to address the legal concerns of the community, Praise AM 1310, 95.1 FM presents Legal. Here are today's hosts.
Good morning, everyone. This is Nathaniel Lee. Thank you once again for joining today. We have our superstar panel. We have Milton and Marlon Primes, the bookend experts on various legal issues. But before we get started, I need to make an announcement. It keeps bothering me. I keep running across people, whether you see them in grocery stores, out and about, who have issue with voting. And the big issue that I keep running across, and I'm tired of hearing, is that when people are arrested for a crime, they keep telling me that they've lost the right to vote. Folks, in Indiana and most states, the fact that you get arrested does not curtail your ability to register nor to vote. In fact, the only time that you're barred from voting is when you're actually incarcerated in state or federal prison. Other than that, you can vote. So don't make excuses, for not voting because your vote is important. We get bad elected officials because people ignore their basic fundamental right. Now, before we get started, also, there was something that was that really bothered the news. And go ahead, Milton.
That I hear what you're saying, Nate, but conviction and incarceration is such a dehumanizing effect on the human psyche that you can't do certain things. You can't own guns. You can't be near guns. You can't vote. You can't. You've lost a lot of rights. And I think the process is intended to do that, to take away your self-respect and your dignity. And so when you come out of that status, it's not certain. When some do and some don't allow you to vote or to have guns or to do this, I don't think it's a clear, okay, you can go back to doing this now, and they itemize it like they do when they take it away from you. So I understand, I think, to a degree, the mental attitude of a lot of convicted felons or people who have lost that right. And I don't think there's any effort to reassure them that you got this right back there. You can do this, and your family looks at you differently. It's a whole different world you come back into, I think, other than that's my reaction to what you said.
Yeah, my reaction is this. I mean, all of us have lived through the mass incarceration that happened in the 90s and early 2000s. And I don't think our society has really come to grips with the fact that, hey, most people are going to get out eventually. And, we have to make sure that we're rehabilitating people while they're incarcerated. And then number two, making sure that, hey, there's opportunities that are available. You still have laws across the country that prohibit people from, getting employment. There's a number of legislation that, hey, say ban the box so that you don't have to, put a conviction years ago on a job application. So there's real life barriers as it relates to somebody who gets out. And if they're able to get a job, what's on their mind is, trying to put food on the table. And oftentimes voting is not, one of the key priorities. I agree with you that there should be more to be done to make sure that they're even with the House and they're able to move on with their lives.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, I had a young, very intelligent air-conditioned guy come to my office a month or so ago. This boy young man was just bright as all out. And I got to talking to him about his personal life and personal things. And he said, well, I got this felony hanging over me, Mr. Grimes. I can't do anything more than this. And I said, how long ago was it? He told me. I said, well, you can go in for an expungement on it. He said, I didn't know that. I didn't think I could. They just don't know all that's out there that they can do.
I agree that there should be more information. I know there's like expungement clinics around the country, and NAACP, a number of African-American organizations, have been, part of, providing that information. And I agree there should be a national effort in that regard to get people reintegrated into society. Because as a consequence, there are people that say, hey, look, there's a whole sector of jobs that I cannot do because of, the fact that I have to put that on my application. The other issue is that kind of goes to our conversation about law enforcement. Law enforcement, they need diversity more than ever, especially when you look at these cases. And the problem is, even if you do get expungement, you have to have a detailed background check to serve as a prosecutor, a police officer. And even if you have a minor, crime, years and years ago, that could prohibit you from providing that needed diversity in the law enforcement area, whether it's a police officer, prosecutor, investigator. Those are very, very important jobs.
Yeah. And it's forcing them to live, Marlon, for lack of a better word, in the kind of the other area of society, the more criminally oriented, the things that they don't have to do to get along and get by and make a living. So they don't feel that welcome back into society, from my experience. I had an Uber driver to tell me that they needed to get an expungement. He didn't know he could get an expungement. It's just that people don't know.
Hey, locally, I'm probably going to ask the prosecutor to come back on the show, Colin, because locally, like here in Annapolis, the Marion County Prosecutor's Office has led the effort to try to get people back into the workforce by voluntarily doing expungement on certain type of crimes.
Mm-hmm.
There are different type of crime. There's financial crime. There are crimes of violence such as murder, kidnapping, rape. So you have to separate the type of crimes, and this is very important. And the reason that's important is because they will help people who make mistakes, and that they want to get people back in the workforce to support their families, their kids, and otherwise. So if we have too many people incarcerated, our society will just go to hell, because you got to have people out there working, paying taxes, and generating income to support their own family. If not, somebody else would have to do that. Now, the second issue has to do with, I was alarmed this week by the insinuation or the talk by Miller talking about suspension of habeas corpus. Now, folks, habeas corpus is an important legal proceeding. The term habeas corpus emanates from a Latin term, but it means you shall have the body. It works if a person has been incarcerated, they can get a hearing by a writ of habeas corpus to go before a federal judge to determine whether or not the incarceration is correct. The court can make a judicial determination if there's a lawful basis for the individual continued criminal confinement. Now, this is very important, because if it's ingrained in our Constitution, one of the fundamental rights of the United States against arbitrary and capricious detention. Now, this right is the cornerstone of democracy. It is so important. I know, Milton, you had to deal with this in your professional career, but it scared me to think that our executive administration with the Trump administration is considering trying to suspend the writ of habeas corpus, which means that we officially become a dictatorship if that word became the law. We're no longer a democracy if you get rid of habeas corpus. That's the cornerstone of democracy.
It reminds me of a police state, implementation of a police state. We make no mistakes. Once we arrest you, put you through the process, you can't come back, no matter what you discover or what mistakes we made in locking you up or executing you. That's just, to me, that is so draconian and Hitlerized and all of the other negatives that I can think of about putting together a lawful society and having respect for authority. It's just not on the playing table.
Well, I mean, yeah, the thing is that nobody is infallible.
That's right.
You know, there are people who are going to make mistakes. And so that's kind of one of the underpinnings of habeas corpus. If there is new evidence that you haven't done something, you should be able to say, hey, look, as Nathaniel correctly indicated, they improperly have the body. The other thing that's really important in terms of this area, and Milton can, you know, probably attest to this more than anybody, is that, you know, DNA technology is relatively new. And so when DNA became more reliable, and you know, you could go back and test evidence and say that, hey, you know, someone who is incarcerated, this DNA evidence that may not have been available at that person's trial or may not have been used, exonerates them. And so we don't know what type of new technology is going to exist 10, 20 years from now. And so if that new technology allows someone who's incarcerated now to demonstrate that they're innocent, and then you deny that right, that's problematic because, you know, as many of us know on the call, there's detailed requirements in terms of the time period to appeal the trial court determination to the Court of Appeals. And then you have to get a writ of certiorari to go to the state Supreme Court or the United States Supreme Court. And so habeas corpus gives you another opportunity to, you know, make a challenge, especially if new technology determines that you're innocent, or if somebody recants, which has happened as well.
I have a friend in St. Louis, Missouri, named Daryl Burton. He has formed an organization, have a board, and I'm on the board, Miracle of Innocence. He was prosecuted and convicted of a robbery and murder at a gas station. And he said it was a one-day trial, saw his public defender for an hour or two. They got the discovery, they go to trial, he gets convicted, but he refused to accept it, kept fighting it, kept fighting it, kept fighting it. Fired attorney after attorney because he said they wouldn't come visit me, Milton, and I didn't see how they could do my appeal. He finally won his release from the Missouri State Prison, being convicted of first-degree murder and robbery 24 years later, based upon an attorney actually taking the case and investigating the case and getting all of the discovery from the DA's office. And in that discovery from the DA's office, they had forgot, I guess, they left a report in there that the eyewitness said that the shooter was African-American, brown skin, da-da-da-da-da. Daryl is a real dark brother, just let me say that. I mean, he's a super dark skin. We call him jet black, okay? Seriously, and humor between us. Super dark skinned brother. And the witness said, yeah, this guy looks like him, but the shooter was brown skinned. They didn't turn that report over to the defense. Just that one report. So judge released him 24 years later. The prosecutor somehow didn't turn that report over, that he was not identified by the witness. Someone else identified him as the shooter because he was running. The shooter was running away. So he's written a book about it. I told him he should title the book "Freed by Black" or some stuff like that. I thought of at the time because he was too dark. You understand? But that's the purpose of habeas, man. You know, this man wouldn't give. He said, brother, I'll put Missouri State Prison up against Mongolia or anywhere else in the country. It's a violent prison. You know, he had to go through that. I've just seen the cases, man, not a lot of them, you know, maybe 10 or 20 in my career of 50 years, where innocent people have been convicted. I've had a couple of them and got evidence later to try to exonerate them with. So it's an important, you know, they said the death penalty is justified because if you kill one person, two people that are innocent, it's worth the benefit of the deterrent effect of the death penalty. I do believe most of us in the justice system know better than that. Nobody's thinking about they're going to get the death penalty when they're out there doing the crazy things. you know, killing somebody or robbing someone. They don't think about the death penalty. We think we're not going to get caught. That's it. The death penalty doesn't scare anybody. I don't want to get on a rant. I'm sorry.
Well, here's what happened. The reason that habeas corpus is important. Newark Mayor Ras Baraka was arrested yesterday by ICE. And I saw it in horror on TV last night. And I saw the congressional delegation explain exactly what happened. And I saw the videotape. In essence, they were trying to, congressional people, which has oversight authority, was trying to look at the ICE facility there in Newark. And they had scheduled to go in to look at the facility to make sure that the people are being treated correctly. The mayor, meanwhile, was with a group of protesters, briefly came onto the property. They asked them to leave and go back with the protesters. It goes back to the protesters, and they got this on video. And then apparently they talked to Aline Habit, the lawyer who I thought was incompetent, who represented Trump in that trial. Apparently she gave them okay to arrest the mayor of Newark, the largest city in New Jersey.
For what?
You get arrested for what appeared to be an illegitimate reason and purpose to send a message. Now, I suspect that when this administration is over with, that you're going to see this lawyer have some significant sanction with the bar for doing something that ridiculous. But on the other hand, this whole thing bothered me in the sense that we got that Martin case going before the Supreme Court, see whether or not they could be held liable, and they're protected by qualified immunity. But this case bothered me.
Isn't Newark a predominantly Black city, if I remember?
Yes.
Right?
Right.
Is the mayor African American?
Yes.
Okay. I just wanted to get those two facts straight.
Yeah, he's a Democrat, and the governor is Phil Murphy, and he said he was outraged by what happened, but they captured on video. And then the part, unless there's something I didn't see, but when I watched on video, they asked him, he was doing peaceful protests along with 100 or so other citizens, and then they asked him to leave off the property. He goes back on the other side of the fence, and then they make a phone call. I bet some people say he talked to Aline Habit, which is U.S. attorney, and she told him to arrest the mayor. So of all those people there, they arrest one guy. And that was an intentional abuse of power in my mind when I saw that happen. And I'm not sure why anybody in America would think that would be reasonable conduct by a U.S. attorney. That doesn't make any sense to me.
Well,
It just seems as though it's a win at all costs sort of mentality. The administration has made a pledge to those that supported them that they're going to, deport X number of, people, per month, and they have a tracker online. And anybody who gets in the way is viewed as a clear and present danger. And we talked a few weeks ago about a judge being arrested regarding similar issues, and the mayor was protesting as it relates to this whole issue about ICE detentions. And there's a rift because your audience should be aware that many of them do that we have a different system. We have a federal system, then we have a state court system. All right. And they should cooperate with one another, but there's oftentimes tension. And part of that tension is that if someone is charged in a state case, whether or not, that's a violation of their immigration status, and whether or not, they're going to keep these individuals in custody, no matter how minor this is, so federal authorities can arrest them. Now, part of the thing that the states are saying is, hey, look, this is an underfunded mandate. You're asking us to hold people. This might be a minor offense. And so there's that tension that we have to try to find a way to resolve it, because I think we're going to have these issues over and over and over again.
Well, I think of when you were talking, Nate, about the overall purpose of Project 2025, and having read and heard that it goes back to 1970 when Lewis Powell wrote that 6-page memo or whatever you want to call it about they have to retake America, that minorities and women were taking over the institutions in America, education institutions, cooperative America. They were demanding rights that they hadn't had before. And something must be done to reverse that takeover by minorities and women. And you see now the placement of people in political places and even the presidency of the United States as people who are designed to, and purpose is to do just that, set us back. And if you're talking about arresting a Black mayor, so what? They can arrest him and they will. You're talking about taking away diversity, they're doing that. And really giving explanations now supporting that. That is discrimination against the majority. And he's going with that. So it doesn't surprise me that this mayor was arrested for protest. You know, it's a symbol, it's a whistle call or whatever you want to call it to the rest of the nation. This is what we're going to do.
Well, I was just curious. Let's look at the reverse of this. If I'm the county prosecutor in New Jersey, the first thing I would do is impanel a grand jury and investigate this arrest. I'm serious. I would see whether or not a grand jury would indict them for kidnapping or criminal confinement or similar type of crime. And so now they can claim immunity, but the thing is, I like to see whether or not they can be held liable under state law for violating state law by violation of a person's right. I think that they need to do a test case on this in state court because sometimes you got to fight back. And so if you see obvious lawlessness, what do? You know, you can't go out and take a gun and start shoot people, but I think that we need to go through the legal process and take a look at this matter and see whether or not they violated state law.
Yeah, I think the remedy is going to be, you know, registering to vote and, you know, getting, you know, voting people out of office and really just educating our people and those of like mine that their vote is important. Prosecutors' votes are important. Judges' votes are important. I can't tell you how many people I talk to around the country where they may vote for the top of the presidential ticket and then walk out of the booth as if those other roles don't make any difference. Those make a tremendous amount of difference. So I think that's going to be really important because the issue of you know, qualified and absolute immunity for prosecutors is going to make it difficult. But I agree with you that you know, perhaps there can be a test case to see how far that goes. But I think ultimately what we're going to have to look at is just educating people about, hey, the importance of these positions, the authority they have. And the third and final piece is we're going to have to start educating our young lawyers about the importance of, you know, building coalitions and starting running for office, for prosecutor, and you know, pushing to make sure that, you know, we get our fair share of supervisory positions because that's where they select people to be prosecutors and judges.
Marlon, I'm afraid that this administration has effectively initiated a chilling effect on a lot of things that we've accomplished over the years, to a chilling effect upon lawyers. Look at the major law societies or law offices who are backing down and who will not go against this president. That is not just cutting the lights off and cutting them back on. That's a chilling effect to representation for people. Yeah, you got a few out here still going forward, but it was an impact, I'm sure, in the long run on our justice system and for the benefit of the people. So we can go through all these lawsuits and different things, but this thing is not over with the judges who will do Trump's bidding or this administration's bidding. I just don't know what to do, seriously.
Okay, for our audience, also our calling number is 833-653-3529. That's 833 in Lee Law. Okay, Pierre, you got a question or comment for us today, sir?
Uh, yes, good morning, everyone. Also, Nate, when folk watching on YouTube, tell them to hit the like and subscribe button for the show. To your point about accountability, Representative Hank Johnson down there in Atlanta has reintroduced the Trust Act, and I'm so glad he did that. And this
I'm
this
sorry, what do you
act
say?
will hold.
Hey, Pierre, I'm sorry, what do you say? The what act?
It's called the Trust Act. It's called I can pull it up here. It's called the something about oh God, I had it. Oh, here it is. The Transparency and Responsibility in Upholding Standards in the Judiciary Act. And what this will do is it'll go after judges who think they can retire and not be held accountable. It goes into retirement after judges that act inappropriately or corruptly. And I want to thank Hank Johnson for that, because that is sorely needed across this country. What I wanted to ask Milton and Attorney Primes, since it happened in your state, of course, real quickly, how do you defend Rodney Hinton Jr.? That's the father that went and ran over the deputy. I mean, I don't condone what he did. I really wish he hadn't have done that. But, you know, for Milton, you're the attorney. How do you defend that?
Give me more
I see a
facts.
lot of people.
I'm not familiar with the facts of what this Rodney Hinton Jr. case is. Please.
Now that's a case in Cincinnati, Ohio, which is a good ways away from me. I'm in the northern part of Ohio. Now, it's certainly narrowly, but apparently, my understanding is that there was a young man who was shot by the police, and sometime after that, his father, went to the morgue, was, grief-stricken as anybody would be, and then, used his car to hit and kill, a police officer. And the police officer, I believe, was buried the other day, and there's been talk of, charging the father with first-degree murder and, having death specifications because of the death of a police officer. So there's a lot of angst in that community. There have been a number of issues over the years in that community as well. Many of your listeners may remember a judge by the name of Tracy Hunter, who was convicted and dragged out of the courtroom. So, we have to really kind of keep them in their prayers. I think the one thing that I'm hearing is to try to, put forth an insanity defense, which I believe is, what the defense is signaling right now. But I'd like to get more facts as it relates to what happened, because this is, relatively new case. But Milton, has the most experience in criminal law amongst us all. But those are my understanding of the general facts.
Was this the officer who, in fact, had killed the son?
No.
No, I believe it, if my understanding is correct, it was a different officer.
No, what happened is that Ryan Hinton's son was shot and killed by a Cincinnati police officer. The guy that he ran over and killed was a sheriff deputy, so not with the same department.
Oh, different law enforcement.
Yeah, and he was leaving after seeing his dead son, and so I guess he had an emotional.
Oh, okay, I'll respond. Please let me respond, Nate, while I can remember what I wanted to say. And that is, during the death of my son, and talking to some neighbors who said that the police would not let the paramedics get to my son to give him any type of rescue aid or artificial resuscitation or anything, and he's wallowing around on the sidewalk, gasping for air. I went through a period of homicidal and suicidal ideations for about a month, if not longer. I remember one day driving down the street and making a turn, and there was a homeless guy walking in the pedestrian walk. and I wanted to run over him. I wanted, my thought was, you SOB, why do you deserve to be alive and walking? So it's a difficult thing that you go through if you think someone is responsible for the death of your child. Especially, I can understand and sympathize with this man's anger and hate, but it definitely is a wrong reaction to the situation. I wouldn't even justify that he had a right necessarily to kill the officer if it was the officer who had inflicted this shooting on his son Pierre. So if we can't get street justice and justify it all the time, I mean, it was a wrong. It has to be corrected by the rules of society, not your individual decision to retaliate. So that's my response to what you asked.
And
Now we
I
got a
agree as
couple.
well. We can't keep, yeah, you can't take the law in your own hands. And, you want to go through the legal system in terms of challenging the shooting of the son. So I definitely agree. But go ahead, Nathaniel. I'm sorry.
Yeah, we got a couple other callers. Callers, go ahead. Next caller.
Hello.
Yes,
Can you hear me?
loud and clear.
Yeah.
Okay, this is Guy calling. Glad I was able to get through with the new waiting room set up. So wanted to congratulate you on that. One other thing I wanted to mention, you may have heard this, but Reverend Al Sharpton's program, National Action Network, this morning, he announced that he was going to have former U.S. Attorney General Carl Holder on his program today at 5 on MSNBC for anybody that's interested. Also, obviously, we have a president of a country that is taking law into his own hands. So I think that we have to remain alert to this fact, and I think it's going to get worse before it gets better. What's your opinion?
It's going to get worse if it continues to go in the way it is going with the present administration. I agree with you, sir. I think that, lawsuits and protests has its effect so much so, but is it going to be enough? I just think there's too many things in the mix right now to say that we can resolve it all by lawsuits and protests. I don't know what the next step is. I'm not suggesting that the next step be more aggressive or anything like that, but people are generally, a lot of people that I talk to are scared. Older people are scared of losing some of their Social Security benefits that they live off of. Jobs are becoming scarce and people are getting fired. You just can't keep lighting matches and not have a major fire. And that seems to be what this administration seems to be taking joy in doing. So,
Hey, Milton, just for the record, as of Friday, there were 232 lawsuits against the Trump administration. 232.
good.
My prediction is this, that there's going to be more lawsuits against this administration than the other 46 presidents combined in American history.
That may be.
I mean, over 200 lawsuits in 100 days. They're picking up 2 lawsuits per day.
But,
I mean,
Well, the thing is too. Go ahead, Bill. No,
No,
but the thing is too, I mean, the administration is saying, hey, we're being targeted. This is lawfare. But the reason I think we have to really focus in on why these lawsuits are being filed, because of, some of the positions that have been taken have really been, just extraordinary. I mean, think about this. And I think President Obama, articulated it. He says, hey, if I when he said, if I were president, and I basically said that, hey, I'm going to revoke the security clearances of law firms that sued to invalidate the Obamacare, American Affordability Act. I mean, heck would have broke loose. And so that's what this administration did. They basically, looked at anybody that they believed opposed them, hired lawyers that they opposed, hired lawyers that they believe deposed the administration and said, hey, we're going to revoke your security clearance. We're not going to allow you to go into federal buildings to litigate cases. And one of the federal judges who ultimately, wrote a very, thoughtful decision, basically said, hey, this brings chills up my spine. So
Right.
there's so many lawsuits that are like that. So we have to focus in on the why, that it's so abnormal in terms of what is being done.
Nate, I don't believe that the paying a person servants of a 6 month salary and that all these other little gimmicks that are being used to placate people for getting fired and changes in their life existence. It's only so long that it's going to, when that money runs out, people are going to be in another state of mind. And I just don't trust what's happening to a lot of people in this society to make sure that there is not a more physical reaction to what's happening. That's my honest feeling.
I definitely think we're under a tinder keg. If you couple the fact that, there are, all these jobs that are being eliminated, and there have been lawsuits regarding just this blanket, termination of people, and saying that it's because of, some type of impropriety. And it comes out that these folks, got a good evaluation. So, and then on top of that, there's talk about, cutting the social safety net in terms of, Medicare and Medicaid. So you're right. When you're looking at these sorts of things, it's a tinder keg. And so I think that, we, as a society need to proceed with caution, but I think we need to really educate people about the fact that these particular gains that were made in terms of, employment rights, in terms of equal employment opportunity, in terms of occupational health and safety, you have to, constantly be a watchman to make sure that those really important gains are not eroded. Medicare, Medicaid, those, if you look at the history, those took a lot of, legislative courage for those to get enacted. And if you're not careful, if you're not watching, if you're not vocal, if you're not active in the political system, you're right. These things could go by the wayside. And you're right, Milton. When we have that perfect storm, there could be a tinder keg. And I think that's something that we need to be aware of.
And we're looking at it though, Marlon, we have the decline in law school enrollment of Black students. We have the decline in the medical school enrollment of Black students. We have the decline of enrollment in the engineering and the science schools. Where are these young people gonna go? You understand? What they
I do. I do. I mean, one of the things that I really wanted to take a deep dive in is look at the guidance from the Equal Employment Opportunity Commission. And they basically are saying that, that to have a diversity program, let's say you have a racial incident on your campus, they're saying to have a diversity program educating people about the differences, our history, can in fact be discrimination. Or the thing that's really important that goes to Milton's question is that many of these student organizations are really important, whether it might be the Black American Law Students chapter at that law school. And in the case of the military academy, there's an organization called NSBE, the National Association of Black Engineers. They've been decertified at the military academies. So, these are people that, try to balance the scales, try to deal with issues in terms of large scale attrition rates. And I think you're right. It's certainly going to be very, very problematic, and something that we really need to keep a close eye on. Very problematic.
And just for the record, I picked up the litigation docket on these 230 some odd lawsuits. And by the way, Milton, they cover every constitutional area. Like, for example, the first set of litigation, and I was trying to go through some of them as we talk, has to do with the Presidential Executive Order 10903, and there was class action lawsuit on habeas petitions.
Mm-hmm.
So the illegal removal of persons, of immigrants, without a hearing they're saying is illegal, and it is. The courts are finding that they're losing those cases. Then the second set, one of the big hot cases was the removal of Abrego Garcia, the guy in Maryland that had certain status, and they took him to a prison in El Salvador, and it was on national news. And I think that when people focus on the one case, that it's a bad idea. It's the totality of what they're doing, a series of illegal acts in the aggregate, not just the one case. And there's thousands of these cases involving clear misconduct. Mm-hmm. And so you see just all sorts of lawsuits that are filed, like dozens of them, that you don't hear about with the same type issue. Mm-hmm. And so I want to make clear that it's such a voluminous amount of litigation. It's unprecedented. I don't think, since I've been a lawyer, that in the first 100 days, Marlon, maybe I'm wrong about this, you hear about 1 or 2 lawsuits or 3 or 4, but not 232. They're doing 2 lawsuits or more per day. So at the rate they're going, at the end of the year, there'll be like 700 lawsuits. In 4 years, it'll be about 3,000.
Yeah, and it's too bad the people who are affected by what is happening, the lawsuits ain't necessarily giving them a relief at the moment, Nate, and I don't know when it will. So that doesn't stop the anxiety and the fear that these people are living under.
I understand. Okay, next call. Call, you have a question or comment for us. Go ahead.
Hi, everyone. I have both comments and then a question. I appreciate the legal system at this point. I know as a Black American woman, I should fear the legal system, and by all rights, they've done wrong by us. However, they have stood strong about the constitutionality of these cases. You know, we've seen some success. I know there's a lot of cases going on, but we've seen a lot of success. Trumpster has lost in almost every case that he's put forward. Yes, there's a lot of them, but he's lost in all of them. We just recently saw Vanita Ozturk just released from prison, and she's now able to go on to do her studies, and, you know, she's still got cases to go on with. We also saw Malawi released. Yes, it's a little more difficult for Mr. Garcia to get released from El Salvador because he's in a different country, and plus the other 100+ people who didn't get due process. However, I am pleased to see that the courts have stood up for due process, even if they haven't always given it, you know, evenly throughout Americans here in the United States. But at least they didn't disappear Black people. They just put us in jail without due process. So I'm happy to see that the legal branch, the judicial branch, is standing up to Trumpster. We also know his game. What he does is he says stuff to see how far he can go. He gets challenged in court. He loses, and then he backtracks. The same thing with the tariffs. He puts up these tariffs. He loses. He makes a mess, and then he starts to backtrack as if he fixed it and blame the chaos on a previous administration. That's the dance we're going to have to go through until 2026 when we get a new Congress. Once we get a new Congress in 2026, all of this stops. And he knows that. The administration knows that. That's why they're doing as much as they can right now with the craziness, because they know after 2026 they will not be able to get away with it. So we're just going to have to do this dance. I'm going to have to do it for a while, and then it's going to stop. And this is how his first administration went, except that it's accelerated now. So that's my personal viewpoint on what's going on at the moment. And we're just going to have to, as Americans, to deal with it and fight back and stand up and protest and do all the stuff. We're also going to have to recognize that we're going to have to talk to people in our communities, form pods where we can help our people get through this mess. But that's my last stance on this. My question is, what do you think about the mayor of Newark being arrested, Mr. Baraka, for going to check a facility, a ICE facility, to make sure that the constituents are being held appropriately. And that's what I have to say today. Thank you.
Well, I saw the videotape. I saw the video on part of what happened, and I thought that based on what I saw, it was an illegal arrest and incarceration. And I wanted there to be a test case. If I was in New Jersey, I like for the local prosecutor to take this before a grand jury to see whether or not they would indict the acting U.S. attorney along with the ICE agent for false arrest and imprisonment and kidnapping or something along that line. I'm not a criminal lawyer, but I like to see them take some action to see whether or not what they did was lawful. What I saw in the limited view of reviewing this, it was clearly an unlawful, illegal arrest of the mayor. But, you know, until I see other evidence, that's my position on it, unless there's some other evidence. But they had a videotape of it, of the entire, of the incident. And you never know whether or not there's some critical, I mean, for example, what I mean is that did the mayor spit on somebody or provoke that? I didn't see any of that. And so if there was some other extrinsic evidence that supported it, I like to see it, but I did not see it in the news clip. And it was only like 2 or 3 minutes, but this incident lasted longer than that.
Well, I'm going to react to what you said. That sounded very good. Sounded like, okay, things will be better in 2026. I'm just not in agreement with you that we can sit comfortably by and wait for 2026 when we are being denied an opportunity to work at jobs we worked at all of our lives, when benefits are being taken away from us that we've been dependent on for a long time. I just think that something else got to be done other than the filing of lawsuits and waiting for the results of them, and just sit by and wait until 2026 for the change of the Congress that may and may not happen. That depends upon how scared people are and a lot of things. So I don't know that we can wait until 2026 for the golden day to come.
Thank you. I appreciate that. I was saying not to wait for 2026. I said we do whatever we can right now. And what we can do, we don't have any of the chambers, so there's not much we can do politically. What I'm saying is that the judicial system has supported us even when we thought the judicial system was against us as Black people, and they have been most of the time. But they're the ones that is holding them back. And I appreciate that.
For the radio shit.
Well, here's the deal that's very important. I agree with something Milton said that was very profound. And I see there are some leaders in the Black community are being proactive. For example, they boycotted Target. And they say that as a result of this boycott of Target, they've now suffered a revenue loss of $12.4 billion. $12.4 billion. If that were to continue, Target going to be in bankruptcy in a couple of years. You know, so I think that the boycotts do have consequences. And I think if they use the right strategy, maybe that could change some of the corporate behavior. This is just one aspect of what we're dealing with, of course, Milton. I recognize that. But it's an important part of asset. A lot of African Americans work at Target. Right. You know, up until the boycott, I used to shop there, particularly because they had certain things that were reasonably priced, like their spring water, for example, were always cheaper than everybody else. But I don't shop there anymore because I respect what they're trying to do. And I never have to go back to Target again. I shop at Costco. Costco said, hell with that. We're going to continue our diversity initiative. And so I'm going to spend my dollars. That's where I'm going to spend it. And for somebody who's supporting people that look like me.
Yeah, and I think it's important in terms of the boycotts, but also, you know, to let, you know, some of these law firms and some of these companies know that there have been successful lawsuits, particularly as relates to the law firms. There's a number of law firms that cut deals with the administration, especially as it relates to the issue of revoking security clearances. Judge Beryl Holloway, in her decision, she's a judge in D.C., basically said that, hey, you cannot have a blanket denial of security clearance. It has to be individualized. So how can it be individualized if firm A cuts a deal with President Trump and you say now they can have a security clearance, and then you slap denial of security clearance on other firms that you believe to be enemies? It doesn't jive. So I think not only is it important to push these law firms and businesses, but let them know that they need to join the fray as well. That that's our expectation. They take our dollars and they should be in the fight as well, because these aren't really overly complex issues, and that's why there's these lawsuits that are being filed. So we should push them. Diversity hasn't been defined in these bans for diversity, equity, and inclusion. Those are easy lawsuits to bring. Judges across the country have been granting injunctive relief, which is emergency relief, which is really hard to do. They've been ruling on cases in the merits, and I think we need to really let people know not only are we boycotting, but we want you to get into the fray.
Hey, Pierre, back to you for a second. What I want to know is that, do you support these boycotts? Okay, I'm losing him. You're on mute, Pierre. Go ahead. Okay, I've lost him. But in any event, I think that our next round of this.
I'm unmuted now.
Yeah. Okay, Pierre, do you support these boycotts?
Yeah, I support the boycott. I don't go to Target. I think we should have just focused on Target and leave PepsiCo and all them other companies alone, because they're just too big and broad, and we can't focus our economic power. But we're hitting Target pretty good, although we got a Target warehouse in Indianapolis and jobs there. We're hitting Target pretty good. But one thing I wanted to leave you guys with real quickly, and that is when you talk about employment, a lot of listeners listening to the show right now are under mandatory arbitration agreements. So we can't even go into federal court and sue under discrimination laws anymore. We're forced to go to mandatory arbitration. And our Congressman Carson and all of these other, they've got to get rid of that Federal Arbitration Act in employment. Thank you, Nate, for letting me make that last point.
I don't, Marlon, maybe you could speak to that. I'm not sure. Most of the time that we faced that when I did this type of litigation, we got out of those arbitration agreements and got into court for different reasons, but I'm not sure how effective they are today, because we kind of limit our practice to death and major injury cases now. Is that still a big thing now?
Well, yeah, a lot of employers do, indicate that there, should be these arbitration provisions, and courts, given their caseload, usually basically indicate that, hey, you signed it and you have to go through this process. The problem is that you have some predictability when we have a judge, because, we know his or her history. And a lot of times it's the luck of the draw in terms of who you get in terms of arbitration. So, what attorneys should do is challenge these to the extent that they possibly can, and kind of see, what the judge will do as to letting the employer void the agreement and go into court. But I do agree that legislation needs to be looked at so that people are knowingly waiving these rights, and there's some type of remedies if, there's any improprieties in terms of that waiver.
Hey, Milton and Marlon, I've done in my career probably more than 50 arbitration trials. And as a general rule, probably out of 50, maybe 95% of the time, we've been successful, only because we're able to select fair-minded arbitrators. I guess what he's talking about must be the arbitration provision he talked about may deal with arbitrators that are not maybe viewed as neutral in his mind. But the ones that we've been able to select, and not in the labor and employment, but I do it in the personal injury and things like that, we've had a great deal of success because you could, once I knew who the arbitrator is, before I agreed to them, I looked at their background, and we have some involvement in selection of the arbitrators. And so, because litigation things you could trace, we kind of know with some degree of predictability. If we have certain evidence, then you could be successful. Go ahead, Milton.
But in the labor set, aren't they inclined to be administrative law judges, and correct me if I'm wrong, who are somewhat dependent upon the system for their employment, more so than maybe your arbitrators on PI cases?
Well, sometimes, there's different things. And you may have like an arbitration, you have people that work with the American Arbitration Association. You have to pick within their list. And depending on how specialized you get, you may get individuals that are defense oriented, or you may not have know the history of that individual, because a lot of times there will not be a repository of their written opinions like you would get for a civil trial court judge. That's what makes it a little bit more difficult, and they could be in a different part of the country as well.
Right.
Well, thank you, everyone. We're at the conclusion of our limited time slot, and thank you, my superstar panel, and join us next week once again, and we deal with legal issues of the day.